All right, let's just jump right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're, well, putting on our gloves and conducting a bit of a clinical investigation. We are looking at a really fascinating and frankly pretty ruthless argument that's been making the rounds in the music industry. It's this whole phenomenon of brand over music. Basically, the core argument we're breaking down today is that the modern music industry, and specifically massive management structures like RocNation, are actively trading an artist's cultural importance for safe corporate luxury. We're going to look at the exact nuts and bolts of how an artist goes from being famous and important to just being, well, famous.
To kick things off, I want to hit you with this visceral quote straight from our source text. You can survive without hits. You cannot survive without relevance. Just take a second to let that idea fully sink in. Because, look, branding can absolutely make you rich, right? A brand can sell products all day long, but music is the thing that actually creates a legacy. The argument here is that the second an artist loses their relevance, their career actually dies. I mean, not financially, obviously, but culturally. Think about the artists you've personally stopped listening to. You didn't stop because their bank accounts got low, you stopped because they just stopped mattering to the culture.
Our sources break this down into a pretty stark comparison. Think of it like two totally different paths. First, you have famous. This is your massive brand deals, your extreme wealth, and being, perfectly safe for corporate America. But then on the flip side, you have important. This is about the actual art, the bars, the albums, the moments that literally disrupt culture. Our source material argues that while chasing fame makes artists highly visible and extremely wealthy, it's only that cultural importance that commands actual respect in hip-hop. Because hip-hop respects your contribution, not your corporate partnerships.
And honestly, the text uses this incredibly dark but kind of brilliant metaphor to describe this shift: artistic euthanasia. The critics highlighted in our sources argue that these big management structures don't actually build legends anymore. They build luxury brands. They argue that management doesn't grow an artist, it embalms them. It's basically this process of taking a dangerous, hungry, culturally important artist and smoothing off all their edges until they're just a polished mascot who can sit quietly next to a CEO. The music is sacrificed, slowly sure, but very profitably.
And you can actually see this sterilization pipeline across real careers. The sources give us a really clear set of case studies here. Take Rihanna, for example. She gave us era-defining music, but then shifted entirely over to Fenty Beauty. DJ Khaled went from being this central pivotal music figure to what the text literally calls marketing furniture, like a walking commercial break. Look at Kanye West. The source argues his actual musical genius and catalog just got completely buried under high fashion and public circus. Meek Mill went from dropping raw, hungry street music to sitting in boardrooms on reform panels. And Bobby Shmurda, who had this massive once-in-a-lifetime cultural comeback opportunity, his momentum was entirely replaced by celebrity moments and industry smiles. In every single one of these cases, the brand essentially swallowed the art.
Which brings us to this crucial reality check, specifically focusing on the Rihanna case study. The text notes that people love to scream billionaire as if her net worth proves her music career survived. But does it? Well, the source argues it proves the exact opposite. Because here's the thing. Fans will forgive weak branding every single time, but they will never forgive weak music. Nobody sits around debating an artist's sponsorships, right? Nobody says, man, I really miss Rihanna's business deals. No, they say, where is the album? When a makeup line suddenly has more cultural urgency than your discography, your music career is dead. Rich, for sure, but dead.
So how exactly does this sterilization happen behind the scenes? Well, the sources outline a specific three-step method they call the industry's favorite trick. Step 1, you take a respected rapper, someone the streets actually listen to and respect. Step 2, you completely remove the risk, the chaos, and most importantly, the hunger. Step 3, you replace all of that raw energy with brand deals, champagne panels, Fashion Week appearances, and this sort of fake boss energy. The industry systematically neutralizes the artist's risk factor to turn them into a safe, sellable product for the boardroom.
And the end result of that magic trick. It all comes down to one absolutely brutal question you can ask the fans of these highly branded artists. What was the last classic? Hear that silence? The sources argue that the silence following that question isn't just some awkward pause. That silence is literally the artist's cultural obituary.
Now you might be sitting there wondering, okay, is this just one random critic's isolated theory? Actually, no. 30. That is the number of different industry voices who have publicly called out this exact phenomenon of corporate sterilization, and a lot of them point directly at Jay-Z's machine and RocNation. We're talking about a huge range of voices here, from fiercely independent artists like Russ, all the way to industry veterans like 50 Cent, Joe Budden, and Dame Dash. And when we step back and neutrally group their core criticisms together, a very clear systemic pattern starts to emerge. These peers are consistently calling out things like bad distribution splits that are packaged to look like independence. They're pointing out a total loss of musical elevation once management takes over, along with massive industry power being used for silent behind-the-scenes control. They talk about gatekeeping, selective loyalty, and honestly, perhaps the biggest one, the constant push for fake boss branding over raw authenticity. See, the common accusation here isn't that these management structures make artists poor. The accusation is that they make artists safe.
Which brings us to this incredibly vivid comparison that the text calls the ugliest truth. Think of it like wolves versus house pets. Wolves are predators, right? They're feared, they're wild, and they are deeply respected by the culture. But house pets? They're domesticated, they're incredibly expensive to maintain, and they exist mostly just to be photographed. The argument here is that the industry takes these wolves and literally domesticates them into unthreatening house pets. And as the source bluntly puts it, hip-hop does not respect house pets. It respects predators.
And this leads us to the ultimate, final state of these careers, which the text defines as the luxury survivor. Basically, a luxury survivor is an artist who manages to stay rich forever while becoming musically irrelevant faster than ever before. They are perfectly preserved for corporate use, beautifully packaged, highly financially successful, but creatively, dead. Now, the industry will always spin this transition and call it maturity, but the critics argue that irrelevance with wealth is still irrelevance at the end of the day. A sold-out soul sitting in a private jet is, well, still sold out.
And that leaves us with one final, incredibly provocative question from the text to chew on. If the songs disappear, why are you still here? If the only answer an artist has left to give us is the brand, then according to this autopsy, that artist is already gone. It really forces us to take a hard look in the mirror and ask what we actually value as consumers. Is it the art that moves us or just the logos that are sold to us? I'm going to leave you to think on that one. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer.